Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Commercial Drones FM. Tonight we're sitting in Drone Deploy's HQ in San Francisco, California, and I'm here with Harrison Wolf, who has a background in public policy, is technical chair for the ASTM sUAS Operational Risk Assessment Standard. He teaches safety management for drones at USC and has his own drone consultancy in Los Altos called Wolf UAS. He actually just published his own textbook called Drones, Safety Risk Management for the Next Evolution of Flight. Welcome to the show, Harrison Wolf.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Today, we kind of have a theme of the show. We're going to talk about how standards are going to help our industry, the drone industry, to flourish. So first, to set the tone, let's go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about Harrison. What's your background? How did you get into drones and this industry?
Yeah, technology has sort of always been something I've been interested in. And like so many in my generation, I just fell into something that I just became really passionate about. Joined USC's Aviation Safety and Security program, doing international business, and was asked one day what I thought the future of aviation would be. And I said, I think drones are going to be pretty big. This was around 2010, 2011, hadn't quite hit mainstream. And my director just started sending me to conferences and helping out. He was former FAA and saw really the impact that we could have as an educational institution on the growth of the industry. And I've been lucky enough to get some really great help in the industry and be able to help the industry grow. So it's been great.
Awesome. So an actual previous guest, Eric Kubica of Drone Logbook, introduced us. So he told me, he contacted me. He was like, hey, you got to meet Harrison. You got to have Harrison on the podcast. So here we are today. That's awesome. So you had some foresight into the coming boon of the drone industry. So what kind of stuff do you do today? I mean, you're involved in a lot of stuff. The intro was a little bit long, which is totally cool. We got some cool stuff to talk about. But let's just start off with one other tidbit. You are on the HAI Executive UAS Committee. So what is that and what's the deal there? I mean, what's HAI?
Well, HAI is an association for helicopter pilots, the industry, manufacturers, and applicants, or people that are using the technology in their everyday lives. And they had the foresight to see that unmanned systems are going to be huge. They're going to replace a lot of industry that are currently employing manned aviation, and they want to have a proactive approach to help guide the industry and create positive change for their own pilots and their current membership, as well as opening it up to new members.
Cool. So like legacy kind of corporate aviation, basically anyone who flies a helicopter or is involved with the helicopter side of aviation.
Yeah, especially emergency response. I mean, there's a lot of helicopter pilots that have to interact with unmanned systems now in the case of emergencies, and understanding how to do that safely and securely is very important.
Cool. So they decided to create a UAS committee, unmanned aerial systems, in order to, I guess, better safely integrate UAS technology into helicopter operations. Cool. So one of the other things to kind of move on from there. So that's a legacy aviation organization. But we also want to talk about one thing how to work with big organizations if you're a contract drone pilot. So helicopter pilots, sorry, we like you kind of, but not right now. So we're just going to focus on the specific drone pilots. So big organizations, if you're a contract drone pilot, let's take it from the very, very top, very high level stuff. I mean, there are some complexities with working with large organizations. What are those?
The complexities exist throughout the workflow, throughout hiring in general. If you go to it, let's say you're an operator, small operator, you have a drone, you want to do work, you want to do it right. To get hired, you have to have a certain number of things. You have to have insurance, of course, and you have to present yourself in a professional way. But you also have to be able to show someone through documentation, through flight logs, through certification and licensing that you're safe, that you understand how to do your job professionally, efficiently, effectively. And large companies do not want to have to take on large liabilities. They want to protect themselves. If we're talking utility companies, where I've done a lot of work, their biggest concern is protecting their infrastructure as well as their own customers. A lot of times you'll be flying for inspections, inspecting distribution lines, generation areas, and the worst thing that could happen is taking out your own infrastructure or a member of the public or hurting yourself. These are companies that are safety focused, that are risk averse, and they're spending a lot of money and institutional buy-in and resources internally to just try this new technology out. And they want to be successful the first time. So that means doing it right and hiring the right contractors.
And we talk about something a lot coming from corporate aviation called SMS. You'll hear it abbreviated, and that is not a text message. It actually stands for Safety Management Systems. Am I right?
Absolutely, yes. Safety Management Systems is something that unmanned systems operators are going to have to become very much acquainted with in the future, but also right now.
So what exactly is that? I mean, okay, safety management system. Like, is this like a computer system, or is this a piece of software, or like what is a safety management system? I mean, how can we explain this in the most easily understandable terms for a commercial drone operator?
Absolutely. I've spent my career trying to do that and creating a system that helps operators do something for safety that's not overly burdensome. Mm-hmm. And SMS doesn't have to be burdensome. A lot of people think, oh, every time I add something for safety, it's going to cost time and money and resources. That doesn't have to be the case. SMS is, in fact, just a proactive way to look for incidents before they become accidents, right? Identify hazards before they hurt you. Let's say you're out in a mission, or you're about to fly a mission, and you do a pre-flight checklist, right? You have to do that for Part 107, is do a pre-flight checklist. Well, what do you do with that pre-flight checklist? Do you document it? Do you hold on to it? If you do, then you can look at them in the future and say, hey, I've noticed that 20% of the time, or 4 out of 10 times, maybe 40% of the time, we take off in bad weather. And I don't understand how that's diminishing my battery or putting me at risk. So you can create a policy or a plan ahead of time, document that plan, and then before you plan a mission the next time, you review it and you understand what that risk is. And that's essentially just what SMS is 4 pillars. You understand safety, you have a leadership buy-in, you assess risks, you mitigate those risks, and then you document it and promote throughout your organization how to be safer.
So a culture of safety really is what it's embodying.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. The safety culture, the proactive approach to risk management, and of course, having a just culture, not punishing people for reporting incidents or reporting accidents. You know, the classic example is having a sign on your wall that says "No accidents in 100 days." Well, if you're incentivizing people to not report accidents, that's a bad thing. You actually want to know if there's been an incident or an accident. You don't want to have that sign. You want to say, 100 hazards identified, but no accidents in 100 days, right?
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of these approaches of safety that we've seen in industries have changed over time. And it's really important for unmanned systems to apply the latest and greatest approach to safety, especially when you're dealing with the FAA or regulators internationally. You want to do so speaking the same language, creating an appreciation for safety and showing that you are doing things the right way.
So if you were a commercial operator and you were starting up a new business tomorrow and you wanted to start targeting some large customers, how would you start implementing this? Let's say you're one person right now. Right. And you want to do a safety management system and you want to institute an SMS. We'll start calling it SMS so people understand and can, start using this term, because it's an aviation term. It's in aviation for sure. So if you want to incorporate a SMS program, what are you doing, and what are the steps you're taking, and how are you are you using specific pieces of software, an Excel sheet, a logbook? What's the deal here? How do we do this?
Those are all great questions. And I think the first thing you do is you write down one paragraph about why safety is important to your organization and how you're going to continue to embody safety, right? That's the first thing. That's a policy. You've created a safety policy. You've shown that you're promising to yourself, kind of like a New Year's resolution almost, write it down. It doesn't take long. And then you create a policy for assessing or identifying risks or how you're going to document that. So you just say, before my flights, I'm going to keep my pre-flight checklists or my post-flight checklists or my inspection lists, or I'm going to track my maintenance. And at that point, you can hold on to those and then say to yourself, all right, every month, I'm going to look them over and see if I can find any trends. If I can say, this is happening pretty often, I feel unsafe, 6 or 7 times. How can I make myself feel better about this? Mm-hmm. And that's just your best way. So you document that. Now, if you want to go out for some of these large companies, you're also going to need an operations manual. You have to write down how you're going to operate. There's a lot of templates online, but it's better if you think through these issues yourself. You don't take off if it's raining. Write it down. Like, that separates you from 75% of the other operators out there, is the fact that you've gone through the idea of writing things down and document them. And then, maintaining your flight logs, and, like Drone Logbook is a software that makes it really easy to track all your flights, to do the reports you need to do, to track your maintenance. And there's no point in living and using a high-end technology for a very tech-focused world and still using like a hard copy book.
Yeah.
Lead the industry by applying the latest standards of technology, I would say, in that case.
And so this is important then for large companies as well, like you're saying. So if you're approaching a company, you say, yes, I have my operations manual, I have my own safety management system. Mm-hmm. This is a good thing to have, presumably then.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And it's not required by the FAA, actually, for commercial operations to do this, but it's just good practice to get into if you're really serious about commercial drones.
Absolutely. And of course, have all those things that are required to have by regulation. Have your license, have your insurance if you're going to be doing business, I would say, and follow the law, right? Like, one of the biggest differentiators is not going to an interview and being asked, okay, can you fly at night? Well, if I don't have a waiver, but I'll fly at night for you. That's a huge red flag. And that's something that I tell my clients to ask when they're interviewing contractors is, you want to have somebody who follows the law all the time. And they do. So don't say you can do something if you can't do it.
Yeah. So shout out to Drone Logbook, like you mentioned. That's one way where you can kind of get started with this. There's others. There's like Skyward. There's Envy Drones. There's Flight with an I, or with a Y. And there's just many other kind of ways that you can get started logging all your information. And this is something that's becoming more and more standardized as drone technology and as the industry grows. We become, it's more apparent to a lot of people, if you get a Part 107 certificate, you are a pilot in the eyes of the FAA. So you are in aviation. So I'm loving where this is going. Thank you so much for this, because a lot of people don't talk about this. And I hope that the listeners of the podcast are getting a lot out of this, because we want to give you as much as possible as far as the topic of how standards can help our industry flourish goes. So you have a company of your own. It's called Wolf UAS. So what do you do with your company? What is it, and what do you provide to people?
Sure. No, it's funny because as you grow a company, this is my first company that I've built, and it's a passion of mine. It's to help businesses understand their responsibility in the unmanned systems market, but also to help small operators become contractors or join those large companies, right? So traditionally what I do is I go in, I kind of see how the operation is being run, or how an industry wants to run, how a business wants to run their company with unmanned system support. Most recently, that's been in the oil and gas and energy sector, and they need certain policies and procedures and documentation so that they can protect themselves, but also create a common language with their operators, and for the operators to understand what their responsibilities are in flying, how close you can get to power lines, how an approval works for an industry, for their company rather. how they're going to fly over power generation or wind turbines. And it's been an interesting adventure, I would say. Each time we do it, there's been a change in regulation. So it's updating and upkeep with that. But then we come in, we do an audit of about 6 months later and how they are operating, and then sort of adjust their manuals. So, we create an emergency response plan, an SMS manual, their operations manual, and their training manual, because ultimately you have to have a certain standard that you hold your pilots to if they're going to fly for you.
And this is a standard that the larger, quote unquote, like the utility or the electric or gas company is holding their contractors to.
Right.
So if they contract out some work, then they want to hold these people to this standard as well.
Right. They want to have a direction for anybody operating with them. They want to have a standard operating procedure for everything that's going to take place on their property or for on their behalf.
Perfect. So they're looking for this too. So it's beneficial to also have your own. So that's like a huge leg up if you do have one of these of your own already. And then you can kind of meld the two together and make sure that, like you said, you're speaking the same language.
Exactly. And there are certain industries that are now coming together in associations, creating sort of an industry-wide standard for how to do things. Oil and gas is one of them. And ours at ASTM that you introduced was the Operational Risk Assessment Standard for small unmanned aircraft. And what that does is it allows any operator a way to see how to assess risk in a way that is approved by the industry consensus group, which is essentially, and this is with FAA in the room helping guide this involvement. So I led this effort we had FAA in the room, as well as a number of organizations, AeroVironment representatives, we had test site representatives, other consultants, and operators. And we all came together to create this standard by which risk assessment could be led.
How can we find information on this? I mean, is there a specific place we can go? Is this something that we should read the whole thing about, or just kind of to be aware of that it exists and then take some cues from it in order to help us develop these programs of our own? Right.
So if you're really interested in gaining access to higher risk environments like beyond visual line of sight or over people or proximity to people, this would be something that you'd want to have in your back pocket. So when you apply for those waivers, you say, we are assessing risk according to this industry standard. Now, to get it, you have to go to ASTM.org and I think purchase it or become a member. And if you're a member, it's free. But it's not an expensive membership. I think it's $100 a year or something like that. Don't quote me on it. Yeah. But you go there and you can download or purchase these standards, because that's their that's how they make money is printing these out and sending them to people. But it's a way for the industry to understand what's expected of them. Because again, you do have the regulators in the room helping the discussion take place. And I wanted to thank FAA for being so involved during that whole process.
The FAA does not get enough credit. Maybe they're starting to get enough credit, I hope, because I've been saying it a lot.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because listen to your podcast, and you've always been sort of a friend to the regulator in an industry that has a lot of animosity at times.
Yeah, it totally does. And Part 107 was just a major step forward. Actually, there's a guy from the NTSB who contacted me. NTSB is the National Transportation Safety Board. They investigate any accidents that occur from the airspace. So anything that ever happens, God forbid you ever crash your drone into something, someone, or whatever property, the NTSB would be the people who investigate it, and they work very closely, and maybe they're under the FAA. I'm not really sure the relationship, but I know someone from the NTSB listens to the podcast.
Is it
so that's
Bill?
Cool. It is Bill.
Bill English,
I think it is Bill. Yeah.
Bill's been very helpful to me as well. And always, what the best thing is that this industry has individuals in it that will share information, that really just want to see the industry grow. And a lot of organizations like NTSB who are willing to share that information as well. So yeah, I totally agree. Bill's been great in helping this industry move forward too.
It's all about, everything the FAA does is about safety. So we're talking about safety and SMS, et cetera. So Okay, cool. So Harrison, you also teach at USC. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, what is the course or subject that you teach on? It has to do with drones, of course.
Yes. So that program is one of the first safety programs for aviation in the world, really. It started in, I believe, 1963. And
not the drone program.
Not the drone program, but the overall USC Aviation Safety and Security program. And they've always been on the forefront of new trends in theory and safety. And the safety management systems for remotely piloted aircraft is the title of the course. I lovingly called SMS for drones, right? It's a little bit easier to put down on paper. We teach it about 3 times a year on site, and then go all over the world, all over the country, teaching it to organizations who want to appreciate SMS and apply it. It's part of a larger certificate. So if you're interested in becoming a safety officer, or you're a pilot and engineer looking to transition careers, or become like a vice president of safety, you take our courses. It's one of 3 in the world, I think, that offer these types of courses. Cranfield, Embry-Riddle, and ourselves. That if you take safety seriously in aviation, you can go to one of our programs and be around like-minded individuals, understand the theory, and take it back to your own organization to improve it and make it more effective.
Cool. So you might be listening to this thinking, okay, safety sounds kind of boring, but it's something. It's part of the culture that you need to cultivate. I mean, it goes back to another episode. Like, I can't emphasize it enough, because sometimes, like, yeah, you're like safety, this and that, but aviation, it's just so ingrained in the culture. And I'll go back to the Mark Bathrick from the Department of the Interior episode, who's the director of aviation there, and has a huge drone fleet of 200 plus drones trying to monitor 500 million acres. And so he has these 4 tenets. Shout out back over to you, Mark, for that episode. But 4 tenets of aviation, or for successful drone companies, and one of them is the culture of safety. So we cannot emphasize that enough. So one of the things that we didn't talk about that I wanted to touch on are these other, third-party auditors. So one thing, I was at AUVSI in 2016, just last year, and I was very surprised to see some corporate aviation, traditional corporate aviation company have a presence at AUVSI, and that was Wyvern, Wyvern. And they have this, like, what are these third-party auditors, and how do they play a role? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this ecosystem of unmanned systems now is attracting traditional aviation entities that serve a vital role, and one of those is third-party auditing. When you set up a safety program and you're seeing it every day, and you're in the weeds, right? It's sometimes difficult to see the things you're doing wrong or the things you're doing right. So Wyvern and some other organizations that are private organizations serve a very important role of sort of keeping us in check, right? Like, so we'll create an SMS plan and we'll operationalize that plan. And then after about 6 months or a year, you might have Wyvern come in and just see if you're actually doing what you're saying you're doing. Yeah, you're talking the talk, but maybe you're not walking the walk. So they come in, they check through your plans, they look at your documents, and they can certify whether or not you're taking SMS seriously up to their standard, which brings some weight to it, right? Because they're known in the industry as being serious players, and they're not just Joe Schmo off the street saying, yeah, he does SMS. This is Wyvern, and they can come in and say, yes, they're doing SMS correctly, or they're operating appropriately. And large organizations, like we talked about earlier, oil and gas companies can say, oh, they're certified by Wyvern as their SMS program meets their standard, and so we can just accept that without having to look at it too in depth. We take that, and a lot of organizations won't hire a traditional aviation organization without some sort of SMS certification any longer, as it becomes required in certain parts of aviation.
Very true. So a competitor to Wyvern, I guess, I can't ever say it's an acronym, or it's an all uppercase.
Yeah, it's like ISBAO.
ISBAO, ISBAO. Those are some third-party auditors, and you actually pay these people to come in and audit you, but that's how seriously that some of these traditional aviation, like legacy companies, take this. They wear their badge of their Wyvern certification or their ISBAO certification on their email signature like a badge of honor. I mean,
Absolutely.
When I was in corporate aviation, you'd just be interacting with flight departments from charter companies, and it'd be like, boom, Wyvern certified, gold, platinum, whatever, and it would have all these, things in their signature, and like that was like, something that's freaking cool. Like,
yeah,
you want to be like, flaunting this. So a culture of safety, again, super important. So you've also, Harrison, you've published a textbook. What is the deal with this? Tell us about this textbook.
Sure. Yeah. I saw a real gap in academic, publications that were focused on unmanned systems. There are a lot of books that are self-published where there's no sort of oversight. And you're not sure. I've ordered a lot of books on drones from Amazon and never really been satisfied with what I got. And so I took it upon myself to try to create a textbook that could be used by both operators in the field to understand their responsibilities. So we talk about things like concept of operations planning, which is looking at your mission, your environment, and the system you're using, which, by the way, is also part of that operational risk assessment standard that we talked about earlier. But then taking that aspect, applying some of the SMS stuff and knowledge to operationalize that for a small operator, but then also have some of the history of the regulations and how our industry is growing, as well as some of the community operators, people like AUVSI or Drone World Expo, some of the larger players that small operators may not be familiar with, but should be. And this is geared also towards some of these safety institutions like Embry-Riddle or Unmanned Safety Institute or USC Aviation Safety to provide an in-class, well-researched textbook that they can use. And so I was lucky enough to find a publisher that thought that drones were going to be pretty big and did want to take a gamble on an unpublished text author. I published some papers, academic papers, but nothing quite this big. And man, publishing a book is hard. It takes a while. It's a lot of editing. I like doing the writing, but not as much of the editing.
Nice.
But this was a fun effort, and I hope it's useful to people, because ultimately, if it's not useful, it's not worth doing. And I think that's the most important thing about safety and SMS is that understanding that if it becomes too burdensome, if it becomes ineffective or inefficient, people won't do it, and it'll just hurt the industry overall. So that flexibility is what I say sort of defines unmanned systems in general.
Cool. Well, maybe we'll add that book eventually to the required reading list of all commercial drones FM listeners. But that's awesome. Maybe you'll see it in a classroom near you sometime soon. So for our last closing question, Harrison, what is your favorite drone of all time and why?
Sure. So a co-teacher of mine, Mark Pastana, who's a Econa pilot for NASA and now does a lot of research there and teaches with me at USC, teaches a case study about an unmanned sUAS capsule called Progress that actually crashed into the Mir station in 1997.
This is in space.
This is in space. This is before a lot of the commercial unmanned systems occurred, but in the public mindset. But what it does is it shows you all the issues that can happen with drones and and every step of the chain there was a way to avoid an accident. And I think it's a great case study. Anybody that can just go and read it takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes to read up on it. There's wonderful Discovery videos about it, National Geographic videos about it. But it's a wonderful unmanned thing that occurred, right? Because it's not an unmanned aircraft; it's an unmanned spaceship, sort of. But it's the way humans interact with technology is just fascinating to me, and I think so. Yeah, Progress, the unmanned sUAS capsule, and that's a shout out to Mark Pastana of NASA.
Nice. I really like that answer. Very unique. I'll give a little background too. If you want to look into an aviation disaster where there was a lot of things that went wrong and a lot of times, or a lot of chances rather, to kind of fix it, you can look into the what happened on the island of Tenerife and the Canary Islands. There was just massive issues that went on where two passenger airlines collided into each other, and almost every single person on both of them died, and they were all full planes. So yeah, you can look into the Tenerife air disaster. And that's just really interesting reading. It can kind of, if you're interested in safety, you can look at it from an analytical perspective. And it's used as an example for a lot of different things in aviation safety.
I mean, that's a great example. We talk about what's called the accident causation chain. And that's at every step, you can look at how this accident could be avoided, right? And sure, 20/20 vision, but what SMS does is it allows you to avoid accidents like Tenerife, because you can create mitigations for problems that have been identified along that pathway that eventually becomes an accident. So
perfect. We've come full circle on SMS, on safety management systems. Cool. Well, hey, Harrison, thank you so much for joining us. This is really enlightening. I hope, and I'm sure that the audience got a lot out of this. Again, if you're serious about commercial drones, then you have to be serious about safety in aviation. So thanks again, Harrison, for joining us. You can follow Harrison on Twitter at Wolf_UAS, and you can visit his website /blog where he writes about these kinds of things at wolfuas.com. And while you're at it, if you want to if you want to subscribe to the podcast, you can do so on iTunes or Google Play. Check out the website at Commercial Drones FM. And if you want to support the podcast, you can do so with just $1 a month. You can check out the Patreon account, a really cool, easy way to support the podcast, and definitely would appreciate that. So, any last parting thoughts that you want to lay on us, Harrison?
No, I just, like you said, if you're going to do this seriously, then doing it through a vision of safety, the idea of, mission first, but safety always, is perhaps one to live by, because you'll be a lot more successful if you do.
Preach. Alrighty, we are going to cut off the mics. Fly safe, everyone. Cheers.